Well, welcome, Lynda Gerty, coach, consultant, amazing person, a warm yet powerful presence in my experience, and somebody that I have a lot of respect for and a lot of affection for. Welcome.
Well, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's very much my pleasure. So just to let the audience know, we talked before this recording a couple of weeks ago or something, and we agreed that we would sort of do this off the cuff without any real prep, and we just want to be exploring the kinds of questions and topics and themes that come up in our coaching, in your coaching and your consulting. Things like manifestation, decision making in business, dealing with stress, where does intuition come into decision making, things like that tend to come up as themes. Make sense?
Wonderful.
So let me just start off by asking you to tell our audience a little bit about what you do.
Oh my goodness, this is the big question. What do I do? I'm in a kind of moment where I'm asking that myself actually.
Oh,
but,
interesting.
The short answer is I work with nonprofit and social change leaders and organizations to support change, hopefully positive change most of the time, for individuals and teams and organizations and sometimes big systems. And the way I describe that and how that shows up really changes depending on the day and what's going on. But that's the broad theme of what my work looks like these days.
Okay. So you do coaching as well, but most of your time is spent in consulting with corporations, with the nonprofits.
Yeah, with organizations. I do a mix. I work with leaders one-on-one and do leadership coaching maybe like 30% of the time. And then the rest of the time I'm working with groups and teams and things like that. So, and sometimes those things go together, which is nice too.
Could you do what you do without your intuition? I'm jumping right in.
Definitely not. No, intuition has been, if I look back at, the meandering path that has led me to this work and this conversation, even, you and I meeting each other and then the work I do and where I live, like there's so many aspects of life and work that have really evolved because of some kind of intuition operating that hasn't always been practical or common sense, and yet has really kind of illuminated the path, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I have a lot of thoughts about intuition, but I link intuition more closely with wisdom and common sense than I do sort of linear deductive reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I look at it as that way that form of intelligence, the way we make sense of complex situations,
Yes.
right? Human situations, lots of different variables, lots of different ways of looking at it, lots of different truths. So, where does it show up for you? Say, let me paint a picture for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pretend, and maybe I'm sure you can relate to an actual case like this. You're working with a team, right? They have some challenge ahead of them. And there is something not quite clicking. Tell me, if it applies, where intuition comes into that as a consultant, and then maybe as members of that team.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, where I want to go actually is there is something about data. Like I work a lot with data and, really hearing from different people in that situation, what's going on for them. How are they experiencing that situation? And this is the way how you and I were trained through our graduate program that we both did together. And so there is a way in which I work, which is grounded in reality and what I'm hearing, like some deep listening. And so in that listening, there's facts and, statements people make and ways people describe what's going on. I guess intuition comes into play in maybe the synthesis of, what I'm hearing, kind of like, or maybe like what's the kind of deeper, what are the deeper patterns or the deeper dynamics at play? Where are the places where are the conversations that are not being had sometimes? I mean, I can ask
between
those things
team
explicitly.
members.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I ask those things explicitly, and other times just noticing, oh, what's not being named here? I just did some work with a team last week that, everything was great. And there was it was a team building. It was a great location. Everybody was, and they needed that. And that was the right, that was what they wanted and would support the team in that moment. And we also had a conversation about like, okay, what happens when difference shows up in this group? And what happens when conflict shows up? And, can we lean into those conversations as a source of wisdom too? And that was quite rich to even acknowledge like, yeah, we're actually not that great at that. Our muscles around that.
Right.
Not that strong.
But correct me if I'm wrong. There's something that leads you to that pattern. There's something that leads you to that. This is a little bit more important than this, because all of the data points, right? There's many different ways you can go with that. And then there's something that says to you, ooh. Now you don't want to go in there and go, this is the problem, this is the answer. We don't do that, right? We let them figure it out. But that is typically a starting point where you start to probe, where you start to question, where you're holding on to it loosely, but you're going, hey, like there's some tension here, or hey, there's some unresolved things here, right? So,
yeah, I think that's exactly right. The intuition and sometimes curiosity like informs the questions, and it's like offering the observation or the question like really with open hands to see without, and I find, in the world and in this work, it's like, there's really the power of like humility of like, I don't know, really, none of us do, but I'm going to like take this leap and offer this piece and see if it gets picked up or not. And if not, that's okay too. That's also moves the conversation forward in a different kind of way.
And it might still be relevant, but they may not be ready to deal with it, right?
100%. Like our lives too, and how we find our way forward. Sometimes the same thing has to show up a bunch of times before we're like, I guess I'll pay attention to that.
Yeah, I believe that I need to be hit over the head metaphorically 20 times before I learn. I remember working with a leadership team in a not-for-profit, and I was leading them through a facilitation, and somebody said, I don't know if we're here to steer the ship or if we're here to support you, meaning this executive head. And in that moment, I got goosebumps all over my body. It felt like there was a collective intake of breath. And I was like, this is a question that needed to be asked 10 years ago, right? And all of a sudden, the exec responded, goes, you're here to steer the ship with me. And it was like everything, 10 years of tension and indecision and not sure of their roles, it all just went,
wow.
Yeah. So I think that's where part of my interest comes in with this work, and in coaching too, right? We're holding on to it loosely. We're not telling the client, hey, this is the issue for you. But that's where we start to probe. We're like, well, what do you do in that situation? What is it that you really want? Are you setting boundaries that, help you with this work-life balance you're so interested in? Right? Is that making sense?
Totally. Yeah, it's a rich conversation.
One that we could
really
go on and on.
Yeah, I'm really curious about what intuition led you to this podcast, and happy by mistake. Like
happy by mistake.
Am I allowed to ask you questions?
Yeah, of course. This is a dialogue. That's what this is all about. Yeah, it's okay. So there's sort of 2 or 3 part answer here. The first part is every single podcast title I had thought about was taken, right?
Of course.
And then I got to this one, and I actually sent about 20 possible names out to a number of friends. And it's interesting. All of them came back with what was at the time Happier by Mistake. I later changed it to Happy by Mistake. So that felt like there was something going on there. And then I thought, you know what, this is perfect. This is the perfect podcast title, and I got here by mistake. Right?
That's so meta.
I wasn't thinking, I wasn't using my brain for this and all these ideas. It just sort of happened, and then other people, the community, got involved and led me more to it and more surety to it. The other piece of it, and maybe this is a good segue, because one of the other topics I want to get into is manifestation, right? And I think, manifestation, that idea that we construct our reality, that the energy we put out into the world, that's what we'll get, right? So if we're, in The Secret, they made it popularized with like, visualize the car and the house you want, and it will magically appear. And yeah. And exactly. So there's a piece of this Happy by Mistake is it doesn't work that way. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I have no problem. I think visualization and visioning and all that stuff is powerful and good, but it's not in and of itself enough. And so Happy by Mistake is sort of like, you're going to get there, but it's not like you put up your vision board and it's going to happen. Right. So that's sort of why Happy by Mistake. And it's about thriving, and it's geared towards anybody. But the people that I typically coach are small business owners, real estate agents, financial investors, chiropractors, sometimes executives and professionals who might have capped out or feel capped out in their career, right? So, but it's really relevant for, I think, everybody. But that's the origin of the name.
Love it.
Okay. Manifestation. I could ask you very simple questions, but I'm I've got this evil streak in me, and Lynda,
I'm happy to go there.
Yeah, I know. This is like, this is a treat for me to be able to pick your brain like this. I absolutely love it. So let's talk about manifestation, that idea of designing your future, because this is something that really, when people come to coaching, even teams and corporations, they're trying to design their future, right? Yeah. So The Secret, I think, did a real disservice to this whole conversation. Yeah. So let me just put this out here. When I mentioned The Secret, your face did something very interesting, and I want to know more about that reaction. Okay? Could you tell me?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that you're naming it and kind of like poking around, disrupting a little bit that idea. I mean, I guess for me, it's a both and, but maybe I'll answer your question about The Secret, which is that, well, I think there's a part of me that's just like a way too practical person to kind of take that as the end all and be all. That kind of idea of, just create your vision board and put $1 million on it and it will show up. So there's that. And I think part of the being practical is just having my understanding of the world is grounded in like social reality and systems of power that, play out and impact our lives unequitably. And, those are really tangible, real things that are barriers, to a lot of things, including just putting something on vision board and having it just happen. And I think, there's an evolving conversation in coaching about all that, which I think is really important and necessary. because I really believe in coaching. I think it's a very powerful approach, and I can say a bit more about why I think that. But I do think it, there has been an absence of kind of analysis of the systems and structures of power and privilege, and without, for me, it's really important to acknowledge those realities and to acknowledge how they impact all of our lives in different ways. And to start there, and then to, what I love about coaching is to, then begin to, like what our old prof used to say, expand the range of possible options that we see for ourselves. Where do I have agency? Where can I move? What can I do? And even to begin, if I think about the word manifesting, it's like even to begin to imagine that might be possible is a form of manifestation, I think.
Yeah, because we're both trained as systems thinkers. We both recognize that, two people can have very different opportunities in front of them, from financial to education to social acceptance to everything else. But also the stories that they're telling themselves, also how limiting they are in their vision, also a background where, I've had a number of clients from backgrounds where their family members are, in their words, actively trying to prevent them from having success, right? And pull them back down and be at their level in their terminology, right? So all of that is real. And yet I love that you brought up the idea, okay, so what can I do within this spectrum? What can I change within that spectrum? Because that's always the beginning. And maybe we'll talk about this when we get to abundance and scarcity. But I have known people, both as clients and in regular life, who came from immense privilege and seemed miserable all the time, saw challenges that were so overwhelming them that they couldn't run their business. I remember one person in particular, very wealthy, very successful person, who had a, let's call it a renovation. And that renovation went above budget and was, causing this person immense stress. And they were talking about it all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, $100,000 renovation, what are you complaining about, right? But trying not to bring that judgment, because he was really, really stressed, right? And I've also worked with people that came from very little, from a lot of barriers, and lived in abundance, believed completely in their ability to do what they're setting out to do. And it's amazing to me to see those two situations. And again, this is not to say those situations and those social economic realities do not have a big impact. Of course they do.
Yeah.
But to say one person has it all and is living miserable and living in scarcity, one person doesn't have much, or at least didn't have much, and is living in an abundance and possibility. And I find that fascinating. What do you think is the difference there? Because listen, the secret does not work for most people, right? If you put up your vision board and you put energy towards it, and you're wanting it, you're desiring it, and you're putting out those thoughts to people, and you're talking about it with other people, that doesn't work for most people. So there's the socioeconomic reality there. What else is missing?
Oh my gosh, you just said so much there.
Yes.
I guess I'm like holding all the levels in this conversation, right? There's like the individual level, which is kind of what we're talking about, is like, yes, as individuals, we're so complex. And this is what I just love humans. Like, we're so interesting. We're so complex. We're like weird in the best ways, And so it's unpredictable, right? What any of us choose to do in any given moment is so unpredictable in some ways. And then also so predictable in other ways, So there's that kind of piece. And I'm happy to have that conversation. That's kind of what you're asking. I guess I'm also just holding the sort of then the social patterns and there is something in me that resists the kind of notion of the American dream, like, the individual just needs to work hard and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they can succeed in capitalism and get all the prizes,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's something about like holding all of that at the same time. Kind of the
Can I interrupt you for
macro.
can I interrupt you for 1 second on that?
Yeah.
What I think is really important there is there's always success stories, right? When all the socioeconomic barriers are there, there's always success stories. It can be done, but the percentage of it is much lower because of all of those things stacked against them. I just wanted to put that out there. But I also want to say, if you have the self-awareness and the drive, you can overcome a lot. And I'd also say maybe there's, like in sports, we'd call it a ceiling to that in some cases, but it's still way more varied and way more colorful and way more satisfying and way more beautiful than if you didn't dream that dream and go for it.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge what you just said there, that like the kind of the numbers or the kind of percentages. And I think that's because so many of us can kind of be in the world and look at, our own lives and the lives of other people and be like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just do what everybody else, is doing? Or why is it so hard for me? And the truth is, I mean, there's a bunch of answers to that, but one of them is around systems of power and how they impact us. So, and our lived experiences and all those things. So I always want to kind of, I don't know, that acknowledgement I think is really important and powerful. And then also, like, I was raised by a father who grew up in a really unhealthy, like, I think it's okay to say this in this venue. He was raised in a violent household, my dad. And he chose not to replicate that. I don't know how he did it. I don't know what it took. We've not talked about it a lot, but like, there was no yelling and there was no physical violence in my household as a kid. And that was my dad making a choice to not behave the way his father did. And I mean, that's had a huge impact on my life, a huge impact. And also I think then he can slide into, well, I was able to like pull myself up and like, we slide so quickly into, the whole world wants us to, like, who's better, who's better, who's better than me and who am I better than? And the whole world wants us to kind of like think about the world in that way. Am I superior or are you superior? And now I feel like we're down a rabbit hole. Like,
no, I love rabbit holes. I love rabbit holes.
So for me, I notice, so these days I'm noticing a lot how hard it is to resist that. And even in my own self, and to really be focused on like the beauty and the unique kind of value of each person, and, how we all are different from each other. And then also, there's lots of similarities and kind of commonality as well. So I don't quite know where I've gone or where I'm going. But
it's all good. It's all fascinating. I agree with you. It's all ranking. It's all, I'm left, you're right. I'm right, you're wrong. Very binary. Life and people, as you so eloquently put it earlier, are so fascinating because they're so complex, right? And societies and systems are so complex.
So I guess what I'm saying, actually, maybe I can land this a little bit, which is like to say that as we go for our own dreams and as we build our own lives and, aim for happiness and success, whatever that means. I think we could talk a bit about that too. How do we do that in a way that is about our own kind of development as a human, our own empowerment and like fulfillment as a human, and without, in a way that recognizes like we all should have that, like all of us are not, and if we have more of it, then how can we share it and kind of make it more possible for more people, rather than seeing it the way many of the systems we're in want us to see it, which is like around ranking and who's better, I'm better than you, all those kinds of things. So maybe that's a way of understanding coaching too, and the work that I do, which I haven't really thought about it in this particular way before, but how to like creating the conditions where more people can thrive and in their individual lives, in their workplaces, in their kind of humanity.
Well, so much that you've said there, so many things that I would love to touch on, like what is success, but let me round it back for a second.
Yeah.
We started talking about manifestation. We started talking about where The Secret gets it wrong.
Right.
You brought up the socioeconomic sort of barriers there.
Yeah.
One of the things that really interests me, because this is what comes up with a lot of my clients, who for the most part are not coming from severe socioeconomic, restrictions. Most of them are doing pretty well, right? But there is a self-limiting belief system. There's patterns of limiting their vision. There's anytime, there's a barrier, a challenge, a setback, it's like, oh, I always mess this up, right? So moving from system to individual, there is also these, intrusive thoughts, inner critics, self-limiting visions and beliefs that people bring to the table. We all have them. It's universal to some degree. It impacts some people more than others. But I tell you, if I was to say one thing, if people were to ask me, from all the people that you worked with, would be your number one piece of advice? I think my number one piece of advice would be, are you aware that you're helping yourself or hindering yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, I hear you talking there about it's sort of like the internal dialogue and the fact that we always have we're always talking to ourselves in some way, and are we to the extent that that's just on kind of default mode or kind of on that we're not aware of it, then it just it plays out and directs us in various
and limits
ways.
us, and in some ways can sabotage us, right? So let me comment for a second, if you will, about The Secret. Because I think they got part of the story right. But it's about how you live, in my opinion. It's about how you live on that journey towards those goals. I'm not saying don't put up a vision board. If that inspires you, if that motivates you, great, right? If it helps you to answer questions, do I invest in this right now? Do I do, or, do I need to make a different business decision? Another topic I want to talk to you about is business decisions. But I think that's all fine, right?
Yes, agreed.
But,
and actually, maybe it's even important. Like, I think there is something about imagining the possible future and actually allowing ourselves to dream about that and actually get pretty concrete in a way that kind of allows us to shed some of what is holding us stuck. Or
I agree.
And I think that's true for individuals, and I think it's also true at a big level right now. We need visions of possible futures for the collective that are powerful to draw us
It's
forward.
interesting. Yeah, the collective, yes. I think you hit on something there that I think is important too, because one of the things I think The Secret gets wrong is about the visioning itself. Right? Because to me, you got to smell it, taste it, see who's around you. How do you feel like? What are you doing? What is it's not just the car and the house, right? It's like life balance. It's like, who are you sharing it with? What's happening in your life? Are you energized? Like, feel it, taste it, picture yourself there. Because it's kind of like the difference between, I'm going to go way off here, but a mission statement at a company. One of the worst things, values and mission statements are one of the most poorly done things in the world, in my opinion, because nobody really relates to them. They don't emotionally connect with most of them, right? It's like you've got to be able, even if you're talking about changing your behavior, right? Do you remember that thing that we did about the new way of being and the old way of being? Sorry, audience, you don't know what we're talking about here. But the idea was to have a vision of yourself as you want to be, right?
Totally.
And it could be metaphorical, it could be, but it was very emotional, right? It was an experience that you felt inside. And that's what you need, a quick 10,000 foot guide to behavior. You need that in a company, much more than you need values written on a wall, right? You need to be able to go, what would I do at my best here, right? And I think that's what you need to be able to do as a person too. What would I do at my best? So I think the quality of the vision is important for manifestation, but I'd also say the journey, right? Are you present? Are you grateful for what you have? Are you feeling joy in the pursuit of this vision? These are all as big of indicators. Are you getting pleasure from the grind that's going to get you there, right? Or is the grind this horrible thing that you're not enjoying and all you want to do is get that house in the car? Because that's when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that is, as I was reflecting on like this conversation ahead of time and the name of the podcast and things like that, it's like, I do think, I don't know, I think maybe manifesting is not how I would put it for myself in my own life. But I do think happy by mistake resonates a lot. And it's so interesting, like how we think we have control, we think we're making decisions that are going to lead us in a certain direction, or we feel like we have to have that, we have to know where it's all leading. And yet we can't know, like,
illusion of control.
Yeah, the illusion of control, the illusion of like, and actually some of the best things that have happened have been those accidents, or like, I think I'm going one way, but it leads me in a different direction. And I think there is something about that sort of like just keeping the movie moving, like, and in small ways. I mean, yeah, maybe sometimes in big ways. I don't know.
I think that's a beautiful and important point that you're bringing up in relation. I know you're not calling it manifestation, but you're linking it to what I was saying about the journey, I think, in a way. Because if you believe you're in full control, you're going to get some unpleasant surprises. It's how you react. It's the lens by which you see those opportunities, as well as those challenges in front of you. If you see that challenge as this, everything is messed now, my plan is completely ruined, the company, the team, the person, they're going to go in a very different direction than if they look at it and they go, okay, what can I do with this? Where's the opportunity here? Yeah. So that's sort of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And I remember I'm just thinking about a conversation I had with a coach of mine at one point when I was, I just finished coaching school, and I was thinking I was going to go out on my own, and I had this kind of idea of what it was going to be. And then this job came up, and I didn't apply for it because I was like, that's not what I'm doing, right? I have this other plan. And then a few weeks later, someone contacted me and it was like, this job, we haven't found the right person. Would you consider it? And I literally was like, okay, universe, like,
yes, right.
I hear you. So, but then as I was taking the job, and it was, it ended up being my job. But as I was taking the job, I was talking to my coach, and I was saying, like, I feel like this is a detour. This is not what I had in mind. And I feel like, and I was describing it in that way. And she was like, well, what if it isn't? What if it's actually on the path and it's aligned and it's like moving you in the direction that you want to go? And actually, when I look back, that is exactly like some of the relationships that I made there, the experiences that I had there. Like, there's so much of what happened that ended up being really helpful and reinforcing, and like a launching pad for what came next when I did eventually launch my own business. And so I just chuckle at that, you know. I sort of had this idea of like, no, this is the path is this way, you know. And so being open to those detours and really listening to, I don't know, what those kind of coincidences and kind of magical occurrences. And then also for me, like listening to my own self about like, okay, what am I being called to here? And what are some kind of some steps I can take, even if they're not what I sort of had in my rational brain decided I was going to do.
I love it. And it brings up this idea of community, of social in your journey, right? Because that person reached out to you, right? Which then led to a whole bunch of other people that you are now connected with that you wouldn't otherwise be connected with.
Totally.
So it brings up this idea of manifesting what you want, designing your life, constructionism, which is really in some ways what I think coaching is about, right? Designing your life in a way that feels good, that feels right, that gets you where you want to go. And it's the lens by which you see yourself and the world around us that we do that we construct. So you could have seen it as you first saw it as, no, this isn't the right, this is a detour, that's bad. But instead you went, I wonder, right?
Yeah, what if?
And there was some social, and your journey in your business, in your career, whatever it is, it's always social, right? It's always social. So that's I think a really important thing. The second thing that you alluded to that I think is really interesting in this whole discussion of manifestation is the idea of prototyping, right? So you said, this is a detour. And your coach said, what if it's not? What if it's a line? What if it's something you tried? Right? That's the way I would have looked at it.
Yes.
I would have been like, what if it's something that you try? It doesn't mean you're there forever. If
Totally.
it doesn't work out, you go back to your other route. This is something that comes up time and time and time and time again in my coaching.
Yeah.
I think because I deal with a lot of business owners, and they're very, driven and ambitious and things like that. And it's like everything has to be planned. Everything has to be, going a certain way. And I'm like, be playful. Prototype. What if you were to approach this like a 3-month project? What would happen there? What do you do at the end of that 3 months? Right? And everything's going great. What do you do at the end of that 3 months if things aren't going great? What if you go to the end of the 3 months and you're not sure? What are your options? Could you approach it like that? Could you approach it as an experiment in a playful way? And sometimes it's just like light bulbs go off, right? Because they have this feeling that it's got to be this one way.
Yeah.
So I love your story because it shows that success can come in meandering ways as long as you're bringing the right mindset to it. And you're doing the work, of course.
Yeah, and I think noticing where you feel energized. For myself, that's been helpful. Like notice where I feel energized about what's actually happening or about the possibility of something happening. Noticing where like I feel drained. This is not, you said the grind a minute ago, like where does this feel like a grind? Where is it sucking my life energy, And we can't wholesale rid ourselves of the grind and move only towards joy. But those pieces of information are like really important. And if we can have a little bit more, okay, I'm really enjoying this element of the job that I'm in or the life that I have or I'm really like paying attention and moving towards those things over time. And I think for me that was, I don't know how much you want to talk about kind of business stuff, but like
totally
the idea of like quitting my full-time job and like launching a business and needing to like make a full-time salary like the next day would not have been accessible for me. Like that just seemed like way too risky. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. It was like, get a job, make it be a good job, make it be a secure job, and like keep that job. I remember when I quit my first corporate job when I was in my like early 30s, and my dad was like, what are you doing quitting that job? That's a good job. It's like, yeah, Dad, but I'm not happy.
Entrepreneurs are risk takers. Entrepreneurs have a
Totally.
higher level of risk tolerance than other people. I also think they're better problem solvers. But anyways, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I also think there's a way to do it that's not actually super risky. Like for me, it was about over time. I had the benefit, the good fortune of a 4-day-a-week, job, full-time job, and so on the day off, on the Friday, I could coach and I could and I just like I built the business gradually over several years, so that when I decided to make the leap, which was actually the leap to grad school first, and then to the business full time, I already had a foundation. I kind of, things were in place to some degree, so it didn't feel there wasn't so much pressure. I think that's the thing that I really, I hear people noodling on of like, I quit I am about to quit my job and I need to make, whatever it is, $1,000 next year. I just don't think personally, I couldn't have done that. Other people probably can. And so that's my own limiting belief. But that would have been hard to do. So I think that small, like what can you do that's like moving you in the direction that you want to go in, like micro steps, and really paying attention to, where do you feel alive? Where do you feel fulfilled? And, trying to do more of that. For me, that's been useful.
And that speaks to the fact that intuition, wisdom, these are full body experiences. These are not simply linear deductive reasoning. Right?
Yeah.
Drained versus energized. Yeah. That's not a logical process. That's something beyond that, right?
And sometimes it's so inconvenient, like I remember when I saw the grad program that you and I did together, and I had been thinking about doing grad school for decades, feels like. I think it was decades, and I just had never been able to convince myself to like, put the time and money in that direction. And then I found the program we did, and it was like, it's in Montreal, which is my hometown, which was like another piece of synergy, but also like I was living in Vancouver at the time, and I was like, things are going to change. Because this just
Catherine
feels
is
like
living
the right
in Tunisia.
Thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so it wasn't rational. It wasn't convenient. It's like, okay, I'm 40. I'm going to quit my job and move my partner and I across the country for a year to do this grad program. Yeah. For some people, that wouldn't be a big deal. For me, that was a big deal to make that leap. But it was so clearly the right thing.
Well, you've been talking a lot about decision making, and I recognize that we're nearing the end of our conversation, which I don't want to happen, but I'd like to dive into that a little bit, both as a coach, consultant, somebody whose mind and spirit I respect a lot. You're a business owner.
Yeah.
You're facing a tough decision. You've got to invest in a new marketing campaign, maybe. You got to decide whether to do that. Maybe you're thinking about hiring somebody on, whatever it is. And what I notice is they start doing the pros and cons lists, and they're locked in the hamster wheel in their brain. And part of what I try to do is get them out of their brain, into their body, into their wisdom, into their intuition.
Yep.
I'm curious about how you look at decision making, and the follow-up to that is, I asked you about this once before, and you talked about inflection points. These moments that really matter, right? So which sort of goes against prototyping, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to speak to that, or if that was just a one-time thing, but just curious about, how do you, what advice could you give? Understanding every situation is completely different. So if there's some advice, as simple as getting out of your head, maybe, if there's something about inflection points you want to bring in, it's It's a free and open question, which makes it a really tough question to answer. And therefore, you can completely throw it back at me or change it or do whatever you want with it. But I wanted to at least put it out there.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And actually, I have a decision to make right now it's a good thing to reflect on. I mean, sometimes decisions come easy, you know, like
I'll give you a free coaching session.
Yeah, exactly. I may hit you up for that. I mean, the truth is I built the business so gradually and kind of with the idea of lightest structure necessary. So that's kind of been it's been a gradual build, but, and some of the things, you know, I was like, oh, for the last few years, I've been like, I really should redo my website. Like I really should. But I've been so busy working that I haven't. And so finally one of my coaching clients was like, listen, I'm a comms person. I'm going to redo your website for you. I was like, okay, that's, that makes it easy. So sometimes things like that, things just happen when they need to happen. But I'm in a conversation right now with a friend. We're thinking about incorporating and like creating something together. We don't know yet whether that's the right structure or approach or what. And so what can I offer about decision making? I mean, I do think to the extent, my experience has been to the extent that you can let it simmer, and not be, I think the urgency and busyness is like such a barrier to wisdom and like really accessing like the deep I guess intuition and
so let me follow up on that.
Yeah.
So I'm a business owner. I have a big decision ahead of me. I'm feeling pressure. I'm feeling, because I'm an entrepreneur, I'm feeling like go, I got to get this done. Wasted moment is wasted time,
yeah.
right? Wasted money. So you're saying to me what?
I'm saying it's counterintuitive, but often it's helpful to slow down, actually. That in the rush to action, we can, it's like fire, ready, aim. That's, to use maybe a violent metaphor, but, that if we slow down, like we can move to action, but we actually often make messes or don't get the results that we are hoping for, and that we can, by slowing down, we can actually make more effective decisions and get the results that we want actually more quickly, which is a bit of a bit confusing. So like what we want to do is rush and get to the thing and put the things in motion, but in that we miss taking things into account. We miss potential options we might have. We miss a whole bunch of things, other perspectives we might need to hear. And so the question I would have for folks would be like, how can you create more space around this? Can you extend the timeline? Can you carve out some time for yourself to really sit with the questions? And because it really isn't about usually the activity that you're trying to do. It's like about the outcome that you're trying to, whatever it is, whatever outcome you're going for. And my experience more and more these days is that you're more likely to actually get the outcome you want if you take the time that's needed to.
Because there's many paths there. Because there's many paths there, and sometimes they're not what we think they are initially. One of the things that used to come up in my consulting was this idea of, I would ask a question of a team like, so what have you thought about how to do this differently? Where are you at with that? And the answer would be, we're so busy putting out operational fires that we have no time to be strategic. And my response was, if you don't take time to be strategic, you're dooming yourself to an endless cycle of operational fires. Yes, 100%. Yeah. This is what you're saying. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's something
because in the speed we are in default mode, and default mode is going to kind of repeat what we already know, right? So in order to do something differently, we actually need intention, space and time, and
So especially true for those people who may have stumbled a few times and have those self-limiting beliefs. If they're in default mode, they're just going to approach it the exact same way they approached it in the past, right? I think that's a very, very interesting point. There's something else there that you're alluding to, I think, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's something about emotions there. There's something about, I don't know, anxiety versus calm.
Yep, 100%.
One of the things that a little exercise I've done with people before is, if you feel the pull in your body, and this is all about body work, the pull in your body towards that thing you really want, that's desire. That's not intuition. I want that car, right? But I can't really afford that car. If you feel contraction, fear. That's not intuition. That's not groundedness. That's not wisdom. Can you get to a place where you are feeling emotionally neutral and take that multifaceted question and make it really simple? Like, should I uproot my life to go to Montreal to take that master's course, or shouldn't I? Right? Does that get me what I want, or doesn't it? So if you're in a neutral place through deep breathing, whatever you want to do, exercise, whatever, and you're not feeling that pull, you're not feeling that push, you're just grounded.
Yeah.
Does that decision drop into your gut, or doesn't it? And it's a hard thing to do. It's not like, it's sort of a learned skill, right? But there's something emotional, there's something body, wisdom, something that you're alluding to because of the way that you framed it, I think.
Well, I mean, the way I understand or think about what you're saying is about kind of nervous system regulation, like, so if we're in fight or flight, we don't make good decisions. We don't have access to our frontal cortex, our brains, our human functioning brains, our executive functions, all that. So we can go by instinct and really like make a lot of messes. And that's like a leadership skill that I work with folks around a lot, that, if I think about back myself at some of the biggest messes I've made in my life, it's like, because I was activated. My nervous system was not grounded.
Right.
So I think I think that is true. Like, I think getting to a place where your nervous system is regulated, and a bunch of the things you said about breathing, exercise, music, dancing, whatever it is that kind of like gets you to ground is really helpful. And then I am curious about this emotions thing you're bringing in, which is maybe slightly different. Like, I don't know. I have a hard time thinking about what does emotional neutrality look like? I don't know. That's an interesting
Well, for me, it's where I'm not projecting into the future with fear or excitement or desire. I'm not going into the past with recrimination or with, oh gosh, I wish it was that. I'm in the now.
Yeah.
I'm present. I'm living in the now. I'm appreciating the breath coming into my nose. I'm appreciating the sound of leaves around me, whatever it is. I'm present in that moment.
Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing. Totally. Okay. And I do think that, what do you feel drawn to or called to in that, from that place, is often a big, that's a big indicator.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I am not saying don't use your brain. I am not saying, but I am saying people get lost up here
100%.
In decision making, and they overthink and they go in circles. Totally. I call it the hamster wheel in the brain. I think
that
I mentioned.
What's some saying of like, don't believe everything you think, Yeah. Yeah.
And it's recognizing, like, even when you're talking about shifts in mindset, those intrusive thoughts we talk about, when you notice that happening in your brain, you're accessing a different level of consciousness, right? So the brain is incredible, amazing. Don't turn it off, please. But sometimes turn it off a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, remember, it's a tool. It's the most amazing, incredible tool that we've ever seen. But it is still a tool, and sometimes it can work against you. You are more than just this. You are this and this and this and whatever else you want to believe. Make sense?
I think that's really key, and it's not the only source of knowledge we have. It's not the only source of wisdom we have, and maybe it's not even the most powerful, even though we tend to think it is. And I think that's becoming more and more acknowledged in our field and in the world, hopefully, that, the body is a huge source of wisdom, and that, many cultures, including indigenous cultures, have like long histories of other ways of knowing that are that have kind of been lost in our Western ways of the Western rational mind, right? And so there's many wisdom traditions that kind of bring us into other ways of knowing things that are beyond the brain.
I like to think, I think, therefore I am should be, I think, therefore I'm sometimes miserable. And even like, neuroscience and things like that have been catching up to intuition.
100%.
And I have this saying that science catches up to grandmother's wisdom 50 years too late. Right?
100%.
So they're starting to see that. And even... what's it called? Heart Math Institute. They're showing how intuition, they're saying intuition, it's more like anticipatory prediction, is something that occurs in your skin, in your organs, and in some cases before the brain recognizes it.
Oh, yeah.
They also are the people behind that study. I think they are. I might be wrong. Don't quote me. But I think they are, or at least connected in some way.
Podcast. Check his facts, people.
check my facts. In fact, let's put that out there as just a blanket statement. Always check Corey's facts. But there is a study that's like 10 years long or something, where they track cell phone usage before major catastrophic events like 9/11. And there's always a spike in the hours before the catastrophic event. So there is some kind of collective, anticipatory, intuitive thing going on a social system level. People are calling their family members. People are calling their friends, their kids. They're saying, hey, how are you? And then something bad happens. What is that? What is that?
I don't know. I'll take your word for that. I haven't read that study, but
I'll send it to you.
I think we think we're really smart. We think we know all kinds of things, and we do in lots of ways. And also, there are many things that are beyond our. Yeah, this is what we're talking about, right? Beyond the rational mind. And if we bring it back to the title of your podcast, that by mistake. Yeah. Maybe it seems like a mistake because it wasn't driven from our frontal cortex, but there's some other kind of wisdom operating that is leading us in, maybe sometimes to the lessons that we need but don't necessarily want, wouldn't choose, but also to, to our, to at least pursue, if not reach, our potential.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think that's a good way to sort of end this amazing conversation that is a total treat for me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for lending your insight and your wisdom and your intelligence and your spirit to this conversation. And I am going to bug you to have you back at some point for a different topic.
Thank you.
And
so
you know
much
how
for the
annoying
invitation.
I can be, so you might as well just agree.
Well, I am so grateful for the invitation, and I'm so grateful that you and I got to bounce off each other over those years in our grad program. I feel like you were I think towards the end of the program, the 2 years, I was saying that Corey was one of my biggest teachers in that whole program.
Well, you too, right back at you.
Yeah.
And you know that. Yeah. Again, social, right? Community social. There's a aspect of that in every journey, right? Yeah. So if you're focused just on that car you want, well, good luck. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's not, I think that's where we get tricked into thinking that's going to make us happier. That's what success is. To me, I mean, relationship is what it's all about.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, everybody's got their own desires, but what I'm saying is, even if the outcome is that car, it's a social journey. So, yeah. All right. Well, hold on one second, and I'm going to stop this recording. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next week.